Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast series with Bridget Johnson. Each month, we bring you game-changing conversations about K-12 education and leadership. Join us as top educators, field experts, and administrators share actionable strategies to transform your school community. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Dean's Roundtable podcast. I'm Bridget Johnson, the founder of the Dean's Roundtable, a space created for student life professionals to connect, learn, share, and grow together. Today, we're joined by two impressive individuals who spend their days helping people grow, not just in productivity and performance, but also in courage, collaboration, and the ability to affect change. Richard Lawrence brings together a remarkable range of disciplines, from software engineering to anthropology, to help teams solve complex, meaningful problems. He's a Scrum Alliance certified enterprise coach and the author of Behavior-Driven Development with Cucumber. When he's not transforming how organizations work, he's on his family's regenerative wine farm or making music. Peter Green helps leaders get clear on what really matters and how to create it. His career spans music composition, agile transformation at Adobe, and coaching top organizations on innovation, strategy, and culture. He's a co-founder of Humanizing Work, a leadership agility coach, and someone who truly embodies the power of range and a growth mindset. Together, Richard and Peter apply Immunity to Change, the powerful framework developed by Richard Keegan and Lisa Leahy, to help leaders and organizations move past hidden barriers and unlock real, lasting transformation. We'll also be weaving in how this work connects to restorative practices, a relational approach to community and accountability that centers around building, maintaining, and repairing trust. In a world where change can feel overwhelming or even threatening, restorative work reminds us we grow best in community when we feel seen, heard, and supported. Richard and Peter, hi and welcome. So happy to have you here today. How are you?
Doing great. It's great to be here with you, Bridget.
Yeah, likewise.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Thank you. And so I got to tell folks how this all came about because I just still chuckle at myself. As many of you know, I'm getting my master's in restorative practices, and the book that we're reading, Immunity to Change, has been a real kind of a light bulb moment for me. And recently, I was watching something that was prescribed for class, and I didn't hit the stop button after the video was over. And immediately after that was a video of Peter and Richard. And so I was intrigued. I watched the entire video talking about immunity to change, and immediately reached out to them at Humanizing Work because I was like, well, they've got to be doing the restorative practices stuff just like I'm learning about. And so they were kind enough to get back to me, but learned that they hadn't even heard of restorative practices. And so it was an interesting conversation. But we're here today, and despite the fact that they're not doing restorative practices and maybe kind of word or deed or using that framework, in terms of what they're doing really does, kind of resonate with me. And so I really wanted to have them on the show today. So I thank you guys. Now, we'll get started. We'll jump right in. And so you both have an incredibly wide-ranging backgrounds. How did your paths converge around the immunity change framework?
I think I may have come across it before Richard did, although sometimes we lose those things in the murkiness of history a little bit. I remember first hearing about it in a different book by Keegan and Leahy called An Everyone Culture. That book was written in
I haven't heard
2016,
them.
and think of it as sort of like immunity to change at the organizational level. And
Okay.
Keegan and Leahy studied organizations that have what they call a deliberately developmental organization. Like they see
Okay.
development of human capability across all types of human capability as sort of generative of good business outcomes. And so they were studying organizations that had this approach. And then there was a section in that book that described immunity to change and the immunity to map, or in the immunity map version of that. And I thought, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that's interesting. Let me learn more about that. And so I went and found the Immunity to Change book. And then
Gotcha.
I was really fortunate. I was at a leadership summit. Richard and I are both Leadership Circle certified coaches. It's a model of leadership. It's a 360 associated with that. And I went to their conference one
Mm-hmm.
year, and Robert Keegan was the
Okay.
keynote speaker at it. And he gave
Oh,
basically a
cool.
2-hour presentation on immunity to change. And at that point, I was all in. I said, all right, I'm going to try this on myself. He invited us. It was about a 2-hour lecture. And he said, if I just lecture at you for 2 hours, you're going to fall asleep. So I need you to find an actual change you're interested in and work through the model with me. And so I did. And it was really powerful for me. And so I thought, okay, this is something that I can use.
Awesome. And so, for those unfamiliar, what is immunity to change framework and why is it such a powerful tool for both individuals and systems?
Immunity to change is a model for making sense of this uncomfortable fact that people say they want to make important changes all the time and then don't actually manage to do it. Like from New Year's resolutions to an example that Keegan and Leahy give in the book is people who cardiologists tell them, you are literally going to die unless you make some simple lifestyle changes. And 6 out of 7 fail to make those changes, like walk a little
That
bit
was
more,
such
take their
that was
medicine.
a jaw-dropping moment for me. I
Yeah.
gotta tell you, I'm like, what do you mean 6 out of 7? I interrupt, but go ahead.
No, I had the same reaction to that. And as Keegan and Leahy studied that problem, they discovered that there's often hidden competing commitments that keep us from doing the new thing we want to do. So we want to do this new thing, but we find that we don't. And when you dig into that, there's some underlying assumptions about us and about the world that make us committed to something else that puts the brakes on the change that we want to make. And they have a nice, simple canvas called the immunity map that Peter referred to. That's a tool for making those competing commitments and their underlying assumptions visible so you can test those assumptions and maybe let some of those competing commitments go. And this is, of course, true for individuals, but it also shows up in groups like leadership teams and in organizational systems, which is where we often find ourselves applying this.
Gotcha. And so, how do hidden commitments and competing assumptions act like an internal immune system protecting us, but also preventing us from growth?
Yeah. The way that Keegan describes that is that our change goal, our desire to change, is like our foot on the gas. We're excited about it. We're fired up. And then those hidden competing commitments and the assumptions that underlie them are like our foot on the brakes. So we're hitting the gas and the brakes at the same time.
And the brakes at the same time.
And those hidden competing commitments, they're usually trying to keep us safe in some way. Right. We've established those commitments and assumptions as like our sense of identity, something that made us feel valuable in the world. So if you think of like a common example that we hear with leaders is, I need to listen more before I jump in. Right. Well, that's a change in behavior. I will listen more, but it's not a change in how the leader sees themselves or how they add value in the world. And so they may have a hidden competing commitment to be smart or creative or independent or powerful. Right. And the assumptions underlie those are something like, if I don't jump in with a clever solution, people will think I'm weak or irrelevant or I'm losing it or I'm losing my edge. Right. And it's those assumptions that are running the show. If listen more is the foot on the gas, then be quick and clever is like the foot on the brakes. And those hidden commitments and those assumptions, those are the lens we see ourselves through. So it's not like we can just say, well, I'm just going to stop doing that. Unexamined, they're like the primary guiding factor in determining our behavior. So that's why they're so powerful. They're trying to keep us safe.
Peter,
They are trying to keep us safe. And who knew?
Peter, I wonder if your story about taking all the gigs would be a good example of that.
Yeah, I could
love to hear a good story. Tell us.
I could share my the example that I actually worked through when Keegan was inviting us to do that in that keynote was the change goal was to be more focused, to say no to more things. My whole life, I've always been like the one that does it all. I'll just do everything, right? And I was getting burned out from that. And so as I worked through it, the underlying assumption, the competing commitment was sort of, I need to be good at everything in order for people to see me as valuable. I remember I had this LinkedIn recommendation one time from somebody that said, Peter's a real Renaissance man. And that just glowed me up. I said, that's exactly who I want to be, right? Really good at many things, right? And so that was what I was competing with when I wanted to say no. And so as I worked through it, the way I decided to test that behavior is one of the things that I was doing at a high level was playing trumpet in the Southern California area. And I decided that I needed to say no to some of those gigs so that I could spend more time on other things that are more important to me. That was my test of the assumption that if I started saying no to things, then people wouldn't value me or I wouldn't feel good about myself anymore.
Mm.
And so I said, for the next week, I'm going to say no to every gig that comes in, no matter what. I'm just going to say no to it. Well, the next day I got a call from a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, so-and-so's sick, and they're wondering if you can cover for them in the Clayton
Oh.
Hamilton Jazz Orchestra," which is like the best of the best in LA, all studio musicians, right? Like this is the call you dream of as an aspiring musician, to get that call and show up and play well and be a good hang, and then you get more calls, right? I thought, are you kidding me?
Right.
This is the test I got to run.
Really,
Right,
today?
right. But I was committed. I was in. So I said, you know what?
Okay.
I'm busy this weekend, which was true. My kids had a thing that weekend. I can't make it.
Okay.
And I hung up the phone, and I was so overwhelmed with a sense of peace and joy that it shocked me.
wow.
I actually brought tears to my eyes that I'm going to be able to hang out with my kids this Saturday instead of going and doing another gig, which I would have wanted to practice all week for and be ready to show up and play well. And it was just this
Yeah.
huge weight off my shoulders. So yeah, it was an interesting experiment. And a couple of days later, I got another call to play with the
Mhm.
great Paul Anka as he came through town. And I said
Okay.
yes. I thought, whoa, man, I messed up. It was like I didn't have anything else. It was a light week at work. I didn't have that much going on. I
Uh-huh.
said, but I didn't keep my commitment. I called him right back. I said, oh, I forgot about something. You should call Brad. Brad's really good. Brad did the gig, and I immediately felt good again. So it was this really
Okay.
interesting test that I can say no to things and still feel like a good human being.
That's really tough in that, especially when, a lot of us, our worth is tied into kind of our work. And if we feel like we aren't kind of doing all the things all the time, we feel like it's a knock on who we are. And that's I applaud you for being able to do that kind of immediate in the moment and recognize that for yourself. But also, even, the other thing that I think happens is that we don't think we can come back after we feel like we've maybe not made the right decision. We feel like, not to lose face or to save face, rather, we have to kind of forge on. And we don't give ourselves space to be able to come back and say, you know what, I actually can't. And that's pretty powerful. So
That was the harder call to
congratulations on
make.
that for sure. Oh, I'm sure. Not easy, but you
Yeah.
did it, and the fact that you felt immediate relief after that, just kind of bolsters your ability to do it the
Right.
next time, right? I would
Yeah.
imagine. So,
Yeah, that made it
and so
almost
in
a better
terms of
test than saying
Mhm.
you're right.
no every time. You got to test the other side of the data and go, oh, yeah, I do feel better when I say no.
Mhm.
And so I wonder, actually, I want to go back to that for just a second because in the moment when you said yes to him, did you feel good? How did you feel in that moment? Were you like,
Yeah, I
"Oh, this
was
feels
nervous about it.
good-ish"?
I was nervous about it, but in the moment, I thought, you know what, I got to do this. I'm running myself ragged,
Mm,
so I've got to do it. I got to say no.
okay.
And to a certain extent, I was a little worried about that gig, like the type of for any jazz musicians out there, I'm a lead player, not a jazz player. They called me to play the jazz chair. I can do that okay. I didn't know if I was going to shine in that
Mhm.
role anyway. So I came up with some reasons why it was okay to say no along with this, right? But at
Gotcha.
the end of the day, I could have said yes, and I could have worked really hard and probably done a fine job at it. And I'm glad I didn't.
Gotcha. Fair enough. So, what's a common immunity pattern you see in organizational leaders who are trying to foster kind of more human centric restorative cultures?
So many of the leaders we work with express a genuine desire to empower their people more. They want to delegate
Mm,
authority, they want to move decision making closer to the work, and yet they find themselves getting into the weeds of the work and making decisions on things that they said they were going to delegate, or overriding decisions that other people make. And when we think about it from the immunity to change perspective, it's not that they're lying about their desire to delegate, like to try to seem like
right.
a better leader. They genuinely want to increase empowerment. But when we dig into it, what's often going on is this hidden competing commitment to it varies for each person, but it's things like, I'm committed to ensuring everything gets done right, or everything gets done fast enough, or that the right stakeholders are pleased. And there's this hidden assumption behind the commitment that this leader is uniquely qualified or informed or aware or connected or whatever to be able to achieve that desired outcome.
Right.
And what's interesting about this assumption is that it's not entirely wrong. That leader probably does have certain skills or knowledge or relationships that their employees don't. So in this case, it's not
Mhm.
about just falsifying the assumption. Like Peter's example was, I have this belief that I'm not going to be enough if I say no, and he says no and he feels good, and it's like, the assumption was wrong. In this case, the assumption is partly wrong. It's I'm the only one who
Mhm.
could know this, but they actually do know things. And out of seeing this over and over again, we actually ended up developing a model that we use with a lot of our leader clients, something we call the 3 jobs of
Mhm.
management. They say, as you're
Okay.
creating this empowered organization, you have 3 big jobs, which is create clarity. Everybody needs to understand what matters, where we're going, who our customer, or who we're serving. That's job number 1, create clarity. Job number 2 is increase capability. And this is one that often comes up when people want to delegate more, is what are those skills, or what's that knowledge that you have that you need to grow in your people so you'd be more comfortable delegating things? So create clarity,
Sure.
increase capability. And then the third one is improve the system. How do you make it easier for people to do the right
Mm.
thing and see benefits from doing it? How do you make career progression make more sense in an organization that's more empowered? There's various things around systems. And we find leaders who focus on those 3 jobs get rid of that competing commitment to, I need to do everything in order
Yeah.
for it to be right. They've created a system around themselves that lets them actually make the change they want to make people more empowered, delegate more things.
And that really creates a pathway for the folks that are working under them in terms of being able to expand their toolbox, being able to kind of think about the work that they do in different ways. I think sometimes as leaders, we kind of put our arms around or kind of hoard all of the things because we're supposed to be the leaders, but you also want to create leaders, right? You also want to, while you want your team to stay with you forever and ever and always, we all know that that's not necessarily the case. And so you want to equip people with the tools necessary to kind of move on and launch them into other, careers or other organizations and have people say, wow, they really did a good job of training you up. Like they do a great job over there versus the conversely, like what were they doing over there? Like, good Lord, he doesn't know how to do anything. And so you want to think about it in that way, and think about how you can build your team. And so
Right.
I appreciate those 3 buckets.
And as you develop your people in that way, as you develop leaders, they develop more leaders. And a common
Right.
fear is that if I develop them too much, they're going to leave, and then I'm going to be left without these great people. And what'll actually happen is if you don't develop them, they'll eventually go somewhere where they can grow and they'll leave a gap. If you do develop them,
Exactly.
you're going to build one of these, like what Keegan and Leahy call that deliberately developmental organization. You're going to build this healthy flywheel of development. So there will be the next people coming up behind them. And there's also more space for you to grow when you don't have to be directing and doing all the work for your people.
Absolutely. Frees up some space to be a little bit more creative, right? Instead of just kind of doing the thing all day.
Right.
So I appreciate that. So restorative practices emphasizes the importance of building and maintaining relationships and fostering trust. How does that align with Keegan and Leahy's view of adult development and psychological safety?
Yeah. So one of the models that Keegan and Leahy developed is a model of adult development through different stages. And it's sort of a shift in how we understand ourselves and our place in the world. For most adults, the dominant stage is what they call the socialized mind, meaning that we
Mm.
respond to social cues, right? It's not an economic model or
Right.
political model. The socialized mind. In this socialized mind stage, our identity is mostly shaped by how others see us. So we feel like a good person
Yeah.
when somebody else sees us as kind or competent or hardworking or smart or reliable. So relationships matter a great deal, but often because they help us maintain that positive self-image in the eyes of other people, right? So that means that trust and connection can sometimes come with hidden pressures. Like we might
Mm.
avoid a hard conversation because we don't want to damage the relationship or be judged. or we might
Right.
conform to others' expectations to stay in good standing, right? Those behaviors aren't necessarily
Yeah.
signs of weakness or immaturity. They're, again, those are protective strategies trying to keep us safe, and they're rooted in a particular way of staying safe and valued at that stage.
Right.
So one of the things that I think, like you said, we don't know the restorative practices model well, but just in what I've read about it in the last few days, is they're attempting to create this sort of safe space, right, for people to surface
Exactly.
tensions in a respectful way, and so that's going to create some psychological safety, which can really help in moving to that next stage of development in Keegan and Leahy's model, what they call the self-authoring mind. And at that stage, person begins to define their identity and values from within, rather than relying on other people's approval. So, what do I see as the right way to live, the right principles and values to live into? And so then they can engage in sort of more honest dialogue. They can take more accountability. They can repair harm without feeling like their worth is on the line. So in that sense, I think restorative practices, they're not just tools for retaining those relationships, right? They can be a support for people's development through those stages of development. So we can sort of honor where people are, invite them into deeper reflection, invite them to own their own development, and then those practices can help unlock growth without forcing it or judgment.
Yeah, without fear of kind of retribution or repercussions from kind of being in that space and learning and growing. And so that's, I think, the beauty of that for sure. So you talk about making work more human. What does that actually look like in practice, and how does it shift power dynamics, especially in hierarchical? I can't say that word today. We're going to try it again. Hierarchical environments like schools.
Yeah, making work more human to us is about aligning with some things that are true about humans and not true about machines and computers, and things like people want to grow, they want to be creative, they want to be connected to other people. People make better decisions when they understand the context around what they're doing and why it matters. And so in the space that we work in, we're making work more human in three big ways. One is helping leaders do those three jobs we talked about earlier: create more clarity, increase capability, improve the system, to be more effective as leaders. And often that means personal growth. And where does your identity come from as a leader? So we're doing some of that work. Another space is collaboration, helping build teams of people who can work together towards a shared purpose more effectively, which is partly kind of process and skill kinds of things, and partly, again, personal development, so that I can show up as a healthy individual on a team. I'm going to be able to contribute more. And then the third space we often work is product management, which doesn't sound like a human thing, but it's how do we figure out how to build products that humans will actually want? Because nobody wants our products and services. Anybody's. People want what they want, and then they hire products and services to help get what they want. And so we try to bring that empathy into product management. Like, let's understand prospective customers or people our nonprofit or school is going to serve. Let's understand them on their own terms instead of in terms of our solution. And then let's create things that they would actually want to achieve the outcomes they care about. So that's, I think, to the first half of your question, that's what it looks like in practice. And the second half, you're asking about power dynamics, especially in hierarchical environments. I think all of these things tend to involve moving authority closer to the work itself. So there's not somebody on high making all the decisions and a bunch of other people executing the decisions, but creating more space for agency, for people to be creative and solve problems in their own work, which brings up different challenges around alignment. You need to be really clear about where we're collectively going if you're going to distribute authority. Otherwise, you have an organization that's going in a million different directions based on individuals' whims. And so we're actually not as anti-hierarchy as a lot of people in spaces where we work, because I think there is a place for doing those three jobs at different scopes. Yeah, I think it makes sense for somebody to say, this is how all of us align and why this whole organization exists. And this is how this section of the organization contributes to that larger thing. And a totally flat organization has to create other mechanisms for aligning at those different levels. And sometimes that takes a lot of energy that could go into actually doing the work. So we've seen value in hierarchy when it's used skillfully and purposefully, and not used in an autocratic and highly directive kind of way. And so a lot of our leadership work is around shifting power, but maybe not shifting all the power, because there
All the
is
power.
a good use of power towards positive ends at different scales.
Time and place, right?
Yeah.
So, what does it take for a team or even an organization, a whole organization, to move from insight to sustainable action?
Yeah, as Richard was describing in his last answer, I think that there's like a natural physics to how a team or an organization works. There's if we don't inject energy, then it's going to go to entropy, right? It's going to go towards disintegration. It's not sustainable by itself. You can't just put a group of people together and say, good, now go be great. Somebody on
Right.
that team has to say, I'm going to overcome that natural inertia of, just checking the box or getting through, and sort of skillfully apply a lot of energy in order to maintain this, because it takes a bunch of energy to get it going, and then it takes a bunch of energy to maintain it, right? So I think at all levels in an organization, it takes leaders going first and modeling the behavior they want to see. Like, there's a great coaching question.
talk.
Yeah. There's a great coaching question from an executive coach named Jerry Colonna, who we're big fans of. And he tends to coach startup founders and often founder pairs. So in a pair, right, there's going to be all kinds of issues with any pair of humans, especially ones where there's high stakes on the line, right? So he often asks them, how am I complicit in creating the conditions I say I don't want? Right? Because the founder will be complaining about, well, my teams are doing this and da-da-da. And he'll say, good, how are you complicit in creating the conditions you say you don't want? It's a great question, right? Because an organization's culture is a reflection of the leaders in that organization. And no one typically has more influence, especially in a hierarchical organization like we've been talking about, than the top leader or top leaders. So for those that are not in that top spot, who may be saying, well, that doesn't help me much, there is some good news, which is that cultures are not monolithic. And kind of the person with the second most influence on how people experience work is a team leader, a team manager. And team leaders can model behavior that's adopted by their team. So we can create microcultures on our team at the team level that reflect that deliberately developmental approach to work.
Yeah, I love that, because I don't think we often give credit enough to those, what I like to call those middle manager folks, right? The people who are kind of on the ground doing the work, but also kind of one foot in the kind of administrative realm or executive realm. They are who you really need to be kind of in touch with and interacting with and giving those skills so that they can do the work and model the behavior that you want to have. So in restorative
I
work,
think
we
one
often
of the hardest.
oh, you
Sorry, Starlink out here in the middle of
It's
nowhere
all right.
means
No.
high latency. Just following up on the middle manager comment, Bridget, we find that's one of the hardest leadership roles, because people usually get promoted into that role for doing something else. Like, you're really good at this job, so we're going to put you in this other job. It's like leader of people who are doing what you did. And a lot of times they don't get the training or the space to grow into the actual new job. So it can feel like their value is just being the best at the old job, which leads to getting into the weeds and not actually creating a healthy developmental system for their people. So that training and coaching and practice in how do I be a manager? How do I be a good leader, rather than how do I just be the most senior individual contributor, is so key.
It is key, and I'm so glad you brought that up because that can happen a lot of times, especially when folks are promoted when within in schools, especially the dean of students position, because they're like, "Oh, you were great with kids," but that's not the only
Mhm.
piece. There's so many other parts of being a dean of students and doing that work and being in the student life office that require some training. And some people can naturally kind of get into that and kind of figure it out, but others I think everyone needs training, whether you're natural at it or not, to really kind of just set the tone and give the framework for the work that you're doing. But I think oftentimes, whether it's we don't have time because that's always people I don't have time we've got to hit the ground running, or you don't feel like it's necessary, and it really is at that middle manager level to get that training so that they can be their best selves, but also train the ones below them, and also be helpful to the folks above them. So it's a both and there. I love that you brought that up. Thank you for talking about that. So switching gears just a little bit. And so in restorative work, we often face resistance when trying to shift from punitive to relational approaches. How do you think immunity to change can help uncover and address why that resistance happens or what's happening there that people are so resistant?
Mhm. My immediate thought is the worry box from the immunity map seems really useful. That's a way
Yep.
of uncovering assumptions that if I make this change, I worry that, and then you get this bulleted list of worries. But that said,
Uh-huh.
I think an important part of the immunity to change concept is the starting point, namely that somebody actually wants to change and then isn't making the change
Right.
they want to make. And I think things like the immunity map are actually a pretty clumsy tool for trying to get somebody else to change. Because from that posture, the would-be change agent is saying essentially, the only reason you're not making the change I think you should make is because you've got these hidden false assumptions
Because you
and I can
haven't
see them.
done
I'm going to tell you where
right.
you're wrong, which is probably not effective. And it's
Generally
actually kind
doesn't
of
work, right?
defensive. Yeah. Let me explain to you why your thinking is wrong. So don't do that. Instead, I think it makes more sense to start from a purposeful and visionary posture. I think it's more respectful.
Sure.
Start from here are the reasons I see that the status quo isn't working. Do you see those things? What else do you see? What
Mm,
if it wasn't that way? Like, let's think together. Let's dream
right.
about how things could look and what that possible future would look and feel like for all of us. And then once you've created alignment on that positive vision, now we can reach for tools like that worry box and say, oh, that seems really exciting, but what do we worry could go wrong? And
Mm,
we like to think of resistance to change as a resource rather than something to overcome. We learned this from Eli Goldratt, the creator of the theory of constraints. He says resistance to
okay.
change doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
Oh,
People don't resist change. People resist particular changes, and
that is
they
true.
they have their reasons for it, and the reasons are often that they know things or they've had
Right.
experience around this. And so when we build alignment around a purpose and then proactively seek out resistance, that's actually a source of information. How might this go
Mm,
wrong? What do you worry about? What has happened in the past when people have tried to make this kind of change? And we treat that as information. And then we invite people to help improve the change proposal based on what has been surfaced. Like, oh, yeah, you worry about that. How might we avoid that together? How could we mitigate
oh,
that downside? And so now we've enrolled the person who is most resistant to the change into making the change better. And I love that
ah,
transformation. Sometimes when we're going to lead a workshop in an organization, the
mm-hmm.
buyer will have a call with us in advance and warn us about somebody. Like, you're going to really,
Uh-huh.
you got to watch out for Peter. He's going to be so resistant to what you're doing, and he's going to have all the reasons why this won't work. And our response is often baffling to them. And we say, I can't wait to meet Peter.
Great.
He's going to be my best friend by the end of this thing.
Yep.
Because if he's pushing back, it's because he cares. He wants to see things be good in his context, maybe for a different definition of good. And we're going to surface that and talk about
Sure.
it. The people I'm concerned about are the ones that have given up and are silently sabotaging the change.
Mm,
So
the
resistance is
silent
actually a good
sabotager.
sign.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It is a good sign. One of the things that struck me when I first started reading Immunity to Change was exactly what you talked about in terms of I could see how I could use this tool on myself, but how would I start the conversation of getting someone else to think about these things in this way? Like, what sort of questions do you ask? Because you like it could be offensive. Like, what do you? There's nothing
Yeah,
wrong with
yep.
me. Now you're telling me to list the things that are wrong with me. Like, what's wrong with you,
Yeah.
lady? You know. And so I'm glad that you kind of talked about that a little bit because that was kind of my very first question as someone who's coaching folks and thinking helping organizations think about change, you don't want to start with what's wrong with you, right?
Well, and like the first rule of coaching is never coach without permission, right? Like, here,
Right.
I'm going to just step in here and coach. And they're like, what? You're going to do what now? No, I don't think so.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Exactly.
One thing I'll add to Richard's point is that when somebody's trying to lead a fairly large change, whether that's a change in process or structure or something like shifting from a more punitive approach to a more relational approach, sometimes there are people who are not going to be aligned with that, and they're not going to
Yeah.
come along. And when we've
Nope.
led large organizational transformations, it's not uncommon to say, you know, we're going to see some turnover as part of this. And so that's one of the costs that you need to consider as a leader when you're thinking about making a major change is who will we lose potentially? And is the cost of losing them
Mm,
worth it? Sometimes they bring something else
mm.
to the table that's hard to replace. And so we don't want to be cavalier about that and say, no, we can just bring everybody along. And if we do our job well, everybody, you know, it's not a Shangri-La kind of everything's going to be okay. We want to be realistic that there are people that don't go along. And sometimes that can be as much as 20% of an organization, depending on how radical the change is.
Mm. That's a good point. And that's, as a leader can be tricky, especially if you haven't worked through your immunity map and your worth is tied up
Yep.
in everyone agreeing and getting
Right.
along and coming along with the change and being okay with
Mhm.
that. And so I appreciate you highlighting that. With that said, can you share a story where a leader or team experienced a breakthrough using this process and what changed for them, not just in behavior, but in
Yeah.
mindset?
Well, first I'll point everybody to check out, if you haven't checked it out yet, the An Everyone Culture book by Keegan and Leahy,
Okay.
because that is about organizational change and taking an organizational
Okay.
approach to that. And there are 3 organizations that are sort of the cornerstones of that book. They're all really interesting organizations, different industries, things like that.
Yep.
An individual one of this, I think the reason this sticks out to me is because of how unlikely it seemed at the outset that this was going to work.
Mm.
So I was doing some coaching with a head of security at a big organization that had like some mission critical things that had to be secure, right?
Okay.
And this was an older gentleman, former military, and he wanted his guys to fall in line, right? And over the years, he had lots of feedback that wasn't really working, that people didn't like working for him, they didn't trust him. And he did really care about the org and he wanted to change. And so in our coaching
Okay.
sessions, he developed this goal where he was going to try and get to know his people better. Like he was going to spend time in one-on-one conversations, just getting to know them as people, asking about their family, how they're doing. And then we got to, Richard mentioned this earlier, the worry box, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you imagine yourself doing that, right? And just being friendly with people and you're walking your beat and you just go up and start, shooting the bull with one of your guys. And what freaks you out about that?
Mm-hmm.
And he started saying, if my guys think that I'm soft, they're going to take advantage of me. They're going to slack off. So then we said, okay, that's telling us something, right? Which is you have
Right.
some hidden competing commitments here. And it was really
Mm-hmm.
a hidden competing commitment to safety. Like when we got it all the way down the line, it was, I can't put the safety of the organization at risk of people thinking I'm soft. That was his belief, was that if I'm nice to people, they'll think I'm soft. They'll take advantage of me. The safety of the organization will drop. Right.
Wow.
So he decided to test the assumption. He said, all right, I'm going to do this in our one-on-ones for a month where I'm just going to kind of, I'm going to talk to them. I'm going to ask them, hey, how are things at home? everything all right? He was going to be super awkward about it because this was a new skill for him, but he was going to try, right? And he did say that he wanted to balance that a little bit, like balance the risk of that by making sure that people understood how important safety was to him. So he did a little bit of that, and then he would wrap those one-on-ones that month with some purposeful visionary, like, hey, here's why safety is so important to me. Here's why I'm always kind of hard on you all, because I really feel like if we let our foot off the gas at all on this, that these are the risks of what could happen. And so I appreciate you sharing what you shared. I just wanted to communicate that that's really important to me, and I think to our organization and the safety of our community, right? So he found that people were pretty wary at first, and they're like, who is this?
What's wrong with this guy?
But then the more he did it, the more people would open up a little bit. And he said that by maybe the 4th week of that, somebody actually kind of opened up to him a little bit, and they were talking about, like, oh yeah, my mom's really sick. It's been tough on me. And the next week, that person came into the one-on-one and said, hey, I wanted to share something with you that maybe you weren't aware of. And they shared like some kind of risky thing that was going on in the org that they were completely uncomfortable talking about before. Right. And so this was he said, oh, when psychological safety goes up, so is my ability as a leader to discover what's putting physical safety at risk in the organization. And so that person coming to him and being willing to volunteer that information, he said that never would have happened before. If I hadn't opened up to that person, they hadn't opened up to me. So this was like a huge change for them.
Wow, that's a great one. Thanks for sharing that. I appreciate it. And so, as we think about wrapping up, what advice would you give to a school dean, principal, or organizational leader? Because I know you guys don't necessarily work with schools, who wants to do this deep work but feels stuck or just unsure where to start?
Well, certainly Keegan and Leahy's book, Immunity to Change, and the other one that Peter mentioned, Everyone Culture, are useful. So if you're an avid reader and you start on things by reading, those are a good starting point. A lot of times, though, we find the leader who feels stuck is bumping not up against limits of knowledge or skill, but the limits of their current identity, like we've talked about a bit here. The way they've been successful as a leader up to this point now becomes the barrier to continued growth. And like Keegan and Leahy talk about, that's a shift in development, one way of making sense of the world and your place in it to another. And in that situation, there's nothing like a skilled coach to help a leader break through that, like Peter was talking about with the example from that organization. And so that's what I would recommend if you really want to do this, and if there are really stakes to it. Like if it matters that you make a change, then find a good coach who can help you have higher leverage as you transform, and then you have this transforming effect on the organization and the people around you. That's just too hard to do on your own.
It is. It is definitely hard to do on your own. So you guys talk a little bit more about humanizing work and the work that you do and how folks can get in touch with you.
Yeah. So our website is humanizingwork.com. We help kind of a few different categories of people. Richard mentioned or alluded to this earlier, but a lot of our work is with executive teams who are wanting to sort of unlock more capability in their organization. But we find that the people that reach out to us are not just people that want to get more productivity or drive the bottom line up or are driven by those sort of almost external motivations. They're people that want those results, but they want to do that by taking care of their people. There's this interesting shift we see in a lot of executives where when they were maybe founding a company or when they were an individual contributor in a company, they just loved the problem solving of whatever they did, whether that was product problem solving or engineering. They loved the problem solving. The leaders that we find really thrive and can take this sort of human approach to work are ones that start to view the organization itself as the problem to solve. Like, what structures would lead to people really thriving and feeling like they can grow and have a sense of agency in their work and are connected to the customer and the outcomes we're delivering. So it's those types of leaders that we tend to work with and their teams to help them figure out how to get great results, but to do that through a sort of a human-centric approach. And then we also help product leaders who are trying to connect with their customers better, have better product results, and teams that want to collaborate more effectively, because all three of those rely on a deep understanding of how humans really function. So people can find us on humanizingwork.com. You can email Richard or I at peter@humanizingwork.com, richard@humanizingwork.com. And you can check out our show, The Humanizing Work Show, which is on YouTube and all the podcast platforms.
Awesome. And so we'll connect all of that to this podcast so people will have those links. So I appreciate that. And so one of the things that I've started to do now, this is a new section for us. It's called the bonus lightning round. So I'm going to ask you guys a couple of questions and just answer with what comes up off the top of your head. So what's one assumption you've had to unlearn recently?
That's a tough one. I think the one that I am currently working on is that I need to feel physically healthy to thrive.
Okay.
I've had some
Okay.
health challenges. Nothing
appreciate
that's,
that.
as far as I can tell, is going to kill me soon. But just, it's been tough. It's been a tough year for me
Yeah.
physically, sort of with some health challenges.
Okay.
And it's easy for me to just say, oh, well, I'm not feeling well, therefore I can't contribute, or I'm going to take it easy. And so I'm starting to challenge this assumption that I need to feel physically healthy in order to really thrive at work and life.
Okay. I appreciate that.
One that I'm in the middle of.
Current book or
Oh, sorry.
Yep,
do
no,
you
go
want us
right- go
both
ahead-
to
go
answer
right
these,
ahead.
or do you want to just
we can go
a few
either way.
highlights?
We're the guinea pigs.
Okay.
Let's have us both answer it.
You are.
All right.
You are the guinea
It's the
pig.
double
So
lightning
hop
round.
right in.
All right. An assumption I'm in the midst of unlearning, kind of like Peter was describing, is probably that my value comes from being smart and solving problems, especially complex problems, in a smart way. In this season, I keep running into situations where I can contribute more to solving a complex problem by listening and caring for people rather than taking on the problem as this objective, logical thing that I work on out here. And because I'm in the middle of it, sometimes I catch that right away and engage well. And then
Yeah.
other times I have the wrong conversation for a while before I realize it and have to back up. Say, oh, wait, the people are part of the complexity here, and I need to interact with them in a more human way and not treat it as an objective problem.
All right, baby steps, right?
Yeah, exactly. My wife is helping me with this as I keep putting my foot
There
in my
you
mouth.
go.
Yeah.
Nice to have a partner in that. So, all right, next question. Current book or podcast that you're loving.
All right, I'll go first. I'll give you a book and a podcast. It's sort of related now that I
Okay.
think about it. The book that I recently read that I've really into is a book called Storyworthy by Matthew Dix. Matthew's like a Moth Storytelling Award winner, Grand Slam winner.
Love
Yeah,
them all.
and he's he's won that several times, and he's written a few books. One called Storyworthy about the importance of story in our lives. And we've talked about internal stories and our identity. And one of the things that I'm looking at through that lens is, what story do we tell about ourselves, and what story do we want to tell? That's not what that book's about. That book's is like, what makes for a great story and how do you make stories interesting and compelling?
Yeah.
But they're connected that way. And then the podcast is one that Richard actually recommended a little while ago called How I Write, which he just brings really interesting authors in and great thinkers, and just thinking about the process of writing. And as AI tries to take over more and more of the writing in the world, it's really nice to say, how do humans actually write, and how do you stand out from the sort of the sludge of AI writing that's out there right now?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Well
So are you
put.
writing a book? Peter?
Well, Richard and I have a couple of projects in progress, we'll say.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Fair
we're-
enough. Stay tuned. Right. We'll stay tuned.
We're good at starting books.
I'll circle back
Yeah.
around on that one. So, all right, Richard, for you, current book or podcast you're loving?
Yeah, one of the more useful books that I recently read is a book called Wanting by Luke Burgess, which it's a kind of popularized survey and application of Rene Girard's philosophy of mimetic desire. Essentially, why do we want what we want, and how are our desires shaped in ways that we're unaware of and probably wouldn't choose? Which connects to what we've been talking about today, because a lot of our hidden assumptions and commitments are things we've picked up unconsciously from other people, from media, and probably wouldn't choose them if we were aware of them. And so starting to see that more clearly, like, how are my desires shaped? And do I really want the things that I find myself wanting for reasons I don't understand? I've been finding some freedom in that lately.
Nice. I like it. All right, last one. What's one line from Immunity to Change that sticks with you?
Probably my favorite line from Keegan. I heard him say it live, and it really stuck with me ever since, which is when he's talking about those assumptions around our hidden competing commitments about our worth. He said, we don't have those assumptions. Those assumptions have us. They own us.
Yes.
So I just love that line. We don't have these assumptions. These assumptions have us. They own us.
They have us.
Mhm.
They own us. That is right. How about you, Richard?
I went back and looked this one up the other day because I had a feeling you'd ask. I went and looked at my highlights, and this one is the idea that has stuck with me. They wrote, "Change makes us uncomfortable is now one of the most widely promoted, widely accepted, and unconsidered half-truths around. If we told you tomorrow that you'd win the lottery, find the love of your life, or finally be promoted to partner, we think you'd agree that any of these would entail big changes for you. But you'd probably also agree that anxiety is unlikely to be people's first emotion and response. So it's not change that makes us uncomfortable. It's not even change that's difficult. It's change that leaves us feeling defenseless before the dangers we know to be present that causes us anxiety." So similar to what I quoted from Eli Goldratt about resistance to change doesn't exist. It's not change. It's particular changes and changes that threaten our sense of what keeps us safe.
Yep. And, that word vulnerability, even though I've learned to use it in a positive way, people still think about it in a way that makes them feel uncomfortable and unsafe and want to protect themselves from that. So that's what kind of popped in my head when you said that. So thank you, guys. This was great. I appreciate you indulging me in this lightning round, but also just participating in this conversation today. It was an enlightening one for me, and I know it will be for our listeners as well. So thanks so much for joining us on the Roundtable Podcast today. Really
Thanks for
appreciate
having
it.
us.
Pleasure chatting with you.
Absolutely. And so, folks, if you liked what you heard today, click like, and share. But also join us again on the next episode of the Dean's Roundtable Podcast. Have a great day.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Dean's Roundtable Podcast. Is your student life program delivering on your mission? Our new K-12 student life assessment moves you beyond anecdotes to evidence-based decisions. Through comprehensive stakeholder surveys and expert analysis, you'll get concrete insights across 8 essential dimensions of student life, from culture and wellness to staff effectiveness and resource allocation. We are seeking founding partner schools to be first to experience this transformative assessment process and help shape the future of student life evaluation. And because this work shouldn't be done in isolation, join our Student Life Professionals community of practice, facilitated monthly with Trey Education. Connect with fellow deans and student life leaders for real-time support, idea exchange, and solutions to your biggest challenges. 8 sessions per year plus ongoing collaboration through our shared messaging group. Whether you need data-driven insights, peer connection, or both, we're here to support your student life leadership. Learn more at deansroundtable.org. Today's episode was hosted by Bridget Johnson in conversation with Richard Lawrence and Peter Green. Produced and edited by Andrick Sigmund and music by PremiumBeat.com. For any questions, contact information can be found in the episode description. And, as always, thanks again for listening.